Hey guys, the Casual Cutter here, and today's video is on the Spyderco Smock. The relatively new Spyderco Smock, the elusive Spyderco Smock, whatever it is. It's a knife that I got in last week and that I carried every day since last week. And it's a knife that I was pretty adamant about not making a video on for a couple of reasons. First being, it's been out for a little while. The first batch went out, I want to say, about a month ago. People got them. There's a few videos on YouTube already. There's reviews on YouTube. So that was strike number one. The second thing is that as soon as I got this knife, I modified it. So that wouldn't really be fair to do a review on. But after about 3 or 4 days of carrying it, I started learning things about it and getting a feel for it, and I said, you know what? I have to make a video about this knife because there's some things that I want to share about how I feel about the Smock. Some things I absolutely love, some things I would change or tweak a little bit, and also the mods that I've done to this knife. So if you're interested in any of those things, stick around and listen to what I have to say about the Spyderco Smock. Okay, so a brief overview and breakdown of the Smock. Because by now, if you've never seen this knife, you can go back and search on YouTube and you'll find a couple of decent reviews, a couple really good reviews that go over all the quirks and all the features of the knife. But without getting too much into it, the Smock is based on the SK23 Custom, which is made by its designer, Kevin Smock. That knife uses a kind of a deviated compression lock system with a button that you can see there. It's kind of like a reverse compression lock. It has a button tapped into it, and that button simply pushes the lock out of the way. All right, so it's actually a pretty ingenious idea that I'm surprised no one has done before, but there's always the very first person to do something, and Kevin Smock was that guy. So the knife has 4 different ways to deploy the blade. You have this top flipper type of approach, all right? Then you have the spider hole, which you can use your thumb to open in either a slow roll or a flick. You can Spidey flick it with your middle finger, or what you can do is actuate the button to push the lock out of the way and essentially make it like an axis lock. The issue with that is that I assume it was Spyderco's legal department that decided they don't want you to be able to just press the button and have the blade fall out, understandably so, from a legal perspective. However, I don't believe the Custom has a secondary detent, and if it does, please correct me on that. But yeah, so the secondary detent is a funny thing because when you take the knife apart, it kind of just falls out. It's nestled in one of the liners with a small, tiny little spring behind it, and it just kind of rides along the blade and locks in here. And then when you flip the knife or flick the knife open, you bypass it, but it's always really contacting the blade. So, you know, I decided I wanted to get rid of that. I saw some guys online that had done it, and I was going to take the knife apart and clean it out as soon as I got it in anyway. So it was very easy to do because as soon as I took the scales off, that detent ball went flying. So it's out of the knife now. I can easily actuate this like a compression lock, an axis lock. And from what I found, the knife feels noticeably smoother without it in there. So that's one of the things that that surprised me about the knife and about that little mod. And to do that mod, all you're going to do is basically disassemble the knife. You're going to take out the 2 body screws on one side and the pivot screw on one side, and then the scale will lift off. Great thing about this is, unlike the Spyderco PM2 and Paramilitary 3, The lanyard tube is not flared into the scales, so that comes right out with a little bit of pressure. So you take the scale off, and you're going to find that detent ball and that spring apparatus are just kind of held in there on their own. And as soon as the blade comes out, they'll pop out as well. So if you want to take those out, just leave them out of the knife and you're good to go. The other detent ball, the primary detent ball, let's see if we can see it through my viewfinder. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see it, but it's attached. There it is. Okay. You see it right there? It's built into the compression lock bar. And it's just like it is on a Para 3 or PM2, which I don't know if you're going to be able to see that either, but it's built into the compression lock bar. And if you have a PM2 or a Para 3, you'll know that as soon as you depress the lever for the compression lock, the blade kind of just falls free. And then you can do this all day. You can open it like an axis lock, close it like an axis lock, and the blade just falls free. The Smock does the same exact thing once that secondary detent ball is out. It just actuates the bar, and it's good to go. So that's the first mod I did. The second mod I did was added a deep carry clip by Lynch Northwest. You know, the clip that comes with this this knife is your standard, you know, Spyderco clip, pretty much that you see on the paramilitary 2 and the Para 3, and the knife sits proud. You know, it really sticks up about that much out of the pocket. So I wanted to just take that down a notch, and that's why the first thing I did as soon as I got this knife in, actually before I got this knife in, I ordered a clip. But I guess why don't we start with the things that I really like about this knife and that I discovered I like about the knife. Starting with the carbon fiber texture on the scales. It is not your traditional peel ply texture that's super fine and grippy that you find on the paramilitary 2 and PM3s. It is a different type of woven carbon fiber that is grippy, but it's still smooth at the same time. It's really weird. It feels good in the hand, and it definitely has a texture to it, but it's not that super fine sandpaper-like texture almost that you'll find on the other knives. And I actually like that. I like this carbon fiber better than those knives. So that was the first thing that surprised me out of the box, and it was a pleasant surprise. Second is the blade shape. Now, I've always been a fan of Warncliffe or Sheep's Foot, whatever you want to call it, reverse Tonto style blades for EDC, just because they just work so well with draw cuts, and the general shape of the blade just works with what I have to do on a regular basis. So I love the blade shape on this. It's got a nice hollow grind. It is probably the sharpest Spyderco out of the box that I've ever purchased new, which is always a plus. And it's just good to go. It really is for an EDC blade. There is one thing about this blade that I'm not 100% satisfied with on a personal perspective, but I'll get to that when we go over the things I don't like about the knife. Moving on to things, another thing that I do like is this button lock. It's just easy to use. It's never in the way. It never gets accidentally depressed. And I wanted to test that out for a whole week, and I'm pleased to announce I never accidentally closed this knife. Not one single time in the past 7 days, so that's good to go. So button lock, I definitely like. Flipper action on this knife. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this because it's unlike any other flipper I've ever owned. But it is surprisingly powerful. And I think that has to do with just the overall geometry of where you're flipping the knife from versus a traditional flipper that'll have a tab here. And that lever action, you know, you're pushing the blade essentially to break the detent and have it swing open on its own momentum. Whereas with this, you're pushing down and it's just, it's a different type of an action. And I really do love the way that this knife flips. It's awesome. It sounds good. It feels good. It's super responsive. Even if the knife is at a position like this, it'll still reliably flip open like nobody's business. I mean, I'm flipping this knife now with essentially no detent. And because of where that flipper tab is, it still fires open, which is fantastic in my opinion. So yeah, flipper action is awesome. Flipper tab is awesome. Doesn't stick out. Doesn't take up any room in the pocket. It's just another pretty ingenious design by Kevin Smock. Going down the list, the multiple deployment methods. Now, I am a big fan of knives that have more than one deployment method. I mean, it's not the end of the world if a knife only has a thumb stud or a thumb hole, but you know, knives that have multiple deployment methods are awesome. If a knife has a thumb stud, I like it to have a double thumb stud. That way I can thumb flick it or middle finger flick it on most thumb stud knives. Thumb hole, obviously, that's just part of the package. Anything that has a hole, you could pretty much flick or flick. But, you know, knives that have flippers and thumb deployment are kind of cool. I don't know. It adds to the fidget factor. So on this knife, you can flip with the flipper tab. You can middle finger flick, thumb flick, and then, of course, you can use the button lock like an axis lock. All right, so 4 different deployment methods on the Spyderco Smock. That leads me to my next point, which is the fidget factor in general. This knife is right up there with the HEA Hunter, in my opinion, in terms of fidget factor. Maybe it's a hair behind the HEA Hunter, but you could actually also, let's see if I can do it. Yeah, I mean, you can flip it that way. You can play with it. I probably flipped this knife, I don't know, 10,000 times in the past week. No lie. So fidget factor is there both in terms of how many deployment options you have on the knife, as well as the quality of action in the knife. It's just fun to open. It's super smooth. It does ride on stainless steel ball bearings. So it has, you know, that bearing feel to it. But I mean, if you have one of these, I'm sure you can agree that it is super fidget friendly, no doubt. No doubt at all. It is fun to play with if that's what you're into in a pocket knife. So last on the list of things that I really liked about the Smock is just the overall design and aesthetics. It is a slim knife in profile, but it is kind of a little bit chunky in width, which I actually don't mind because that gives me, you know, a good purchase on the knife, good feel in hand. But I do like the slimness, if nothing more than just from an aesthetic standpoint. I mean, the knife looks good. It looks good on video. I think it photographs extremely well, if that's what you're into. I mean, it's a good looking knife. I do like the speed hole type cutouts. I wasn't sure that I would like that, but having the knife, and yes, they are on both sides. They're just hidden by the clip. But just like the SK23, they have those holes in the Smock, and once I had it in hand, I don't know, it just adds more of a three-dimensional element to the knife, and I like them. So there's that as well. The carbon fiber looks good on this knife. I think the blade shape looks good. So aesthetic-wise, I think the Smock is a total package. I think it's a good-looking knife, and the design was done very, very well in terms of aesthetics. The functionality in the design is also there, as you can see, 100%. I mean, you have an excellent unorthodox flipper tab. You have a button lock built in. You have that Wharncliffe shaped blade, which is super useful in just about any scenario. You have a spider hole, which makes everything awesome, I think. I think any knife that, you know, you add a spider hole to makes it at least 47% better across the board. So, yeah, design and aesthetics, I think, are a home run on this knife. Right there along with build quality, you have your traditional Spyderco build quality. This knife's out of the Taichung factory, so it's all there. I did have a smudging issue on the blade steel when I got this knife in. I was able to get most of it out, but there was some weird stain in the steel. But I don't care. I'm going to use this knife as a user and as an EDC, and you know, it's going to get scratched up. It's going to get more stains and smudges on it, most of which will likely come off. But you know, it didn't really bother me that much because I knew I was going to use this knife quite a bit. So those are the things I like about the Smock. Now the things that I don't like so much about the Smock. We'll start with the pocket clip. You know, that pocket clip was in... This might not apply to you. You might not care. You might like that more of the knife sticks out of the pocket, and that's fine. When I myself reach down in to grab my knife, I grab down here onto the pocket clip anyway to pull it out. Some people grab just the little nub that's sticking out of their pocket. I don't know. I see myself dropping a knife that way, but for me, the pocket clip was pretty horrendous out of the box. It looked good. It felt good in the hand, but it just didn't carry where I wanted it to. So Lynch came to the rescue with a deep carry pocket clip option. You can also get deep carry clips from MXG Gear and a number of other places. Basically, any clip that's going to fit your PM2 or Para 3 is going to fit the Smock for the most part. It has that same hole pattern that those knives have. So I didn't like the clip, but you know what? It was an easy fix. Yeah, it cost me 20 bucks or so, but you know, you got to keep these craftsmen in business, these guys that make aftermarket parts. If every knife that we bought from the factory, every production knife was perfect, you wouldn't have any of these aftermarket parts. You wouldn't have, you know, anodized screws from blades we love. You wouldn't have so many awesome deep carry clip options from MXG Gear and Lynch Northwest. You wouldn't have scale options from Suingab and Aramis and Shepherd. All these independent craftsmen that make aftermarket upgrades for these knives wouldn't exist if every knife was perfect. So I can see both sides. I can see you wanting to just buy a brand new knife and have it be exactly what you want, but at the same time, not everybody wants the same exact thing. So if I get a knife in and the only thing wrong is the pocket clip and that I think it rides too high, I count my blessings on that knife purchase because there are worse things that can happen. So pocket clip, take that off the list. Now there's only two other things that I didn't really like about this and wasn't a fan of. The second thing is the secondary detent. And again, easy fix. Take the knife apart and it pretty much fixes itself. It flies out of the knife. Make sure you pull the spring out and you're good to go. That secondary detent, I am convinced, is only there to appease some lawyer somewhere that told Spyderco that that would be bad when this isn't. my pair of 3 is a little tight. I tightened the pivot the other day just to play around with it. But yeah, I mean, I understand that with a traditional compression lock, you have to reach your finger in and depress that bar for the blade to fall out. Whereas with this one, it has a button. I understand that. And, you know, I can see both sides, like I said. But I wasn't a fan of the secondary detent. I prefer the action without it. I prefer to be able to easily open this like an access lock. Now, with that secondary detent in, you can still do this with the knife, but I found I had to push this button, which you can see where it sits now. I had to push it all the way in to the back of the scale to get this to fall freely, and even then there was still some binding on that detent ball from what I saw. So there's that. I don't know. I don't think it needs to be there, so I took it out. But proceed with caution if you're not sure. Maybe try the knife both different ways. But it is an option. So that's the second thing I wasn't a huge fan of. The last thing, which I can't really do anything about, is when I first got this knife, I was not a fan of the ergonomics. You know, by design, the Smock has this blocked section here. And when you hold the knife like this in like a 3.5 finger grip, you know, it's fine, but you're not getting a full grip on the knife. So when you choke up, your index finger kind of has nowhere to go except for right on that block, and it just kind of doesn't feel natural. This choil is, you know, it's not really a finger choil. You can place your finger there, but it's pretty close. I would only find myself choking up like that if I'm doing really fine cutting tasks that don't require a lot of pressure. But yeah, this knife just felt off in the hand. But after 2, maybe 3 days of carrying it, I started noticing that I wasn't paying attention to that anymore. And I think it was just having to get used to the shape of the handle scales on this knife. It still does feel weird to me. Your mileage may vary. But like I said, after a couple days, I got used to it. And it wasn't an issue anymore. And you know what? I lied. There is a fourth thing that I don't necessarily not like about the knife, but I noticed it was an issue. And that is this choil here. It kind of can get bound up if you get kind of a little aggressive with a cut and go to cut into something. It did get caught on a dog food bag for me. So, you know, it's one of those things. But I mean, those are all pretty much trivial issues. The pocket clip can be changed. That's an issue on a bunch of knives. The secondary detent ball shouldn't even really be there. So that's kind of a non-issue because you can take it out if you don't like it. And if you do like it, it's not an issue at all. But the ergos are something that you're going to have to get used to. So I guess in conclusion, my overall consensus on the Smock is that I really do like it. Despite its early production delays and the roller coaster of hype and emotions that went along with that, the knife itself has either met or exceeded pretty much all my expectations that I've had over the past year since Spyderco announced and teased us with prototype pictures. You know, the few issues that I do have are either easily fixable or easily outweighed by all the positives I see in the knife. The fact that Kevin Smock was, you know, basically able to reverse engineer the compression lock and that whole mechanism and make it even better with the addition of a button is simplistic yet a surprising concept at the same time. So I mean, there's that. The plethora of opening methods, especially after removing the secondary detent. You know, these things only add to the extreme fidget factor of the knife. Is the Smock perfect? No, but I don't think any knife is truly perfect. Was the Smock worth the wait? Absolutely. I think this knife, after you get it in hand and play with it for a day or two, I think the majority of you will agree that it was totally worth the wait. Absolutely. So, I guess that's it. I guess that is how I feel about spending a week with the Smock and what I've discovered, what I've changed myself, and the few little quirks I had with it. So, yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe for future content if you want to see more knife videos. And if you liked what you saw in this video, hit the like button. And always feel free to comment with any feedback, questions, opinions, anything you have to say or ask about this knife. I'd be happy to hear it. So, as always, you can find me on Instagram at The Casual Cutter and Facebook as well. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.